I want to talk to you about something that is simple, something that happens quickly, and something that a lot of times we take for granted. Sometimes it's we can't help but notice it, and it's this. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, "Just a moment." You ever heard that before? Like somebody call you before, and you're like, "Hey, all right, just a moment." You know, moments are these funny things because, like I said, moments can be this thing in your life that you don't even really know or recognize that are there. Moments can, happen in a moment. You know, moments can happen. We can have funny moments. We can have sad moments. We can have moments in our lives that define our lives. And we can have moments in our lives that absolutely change the course of our lives. You know, when I was thinking about a moment that happened in my life that changed the course of my life, I was thinking back to about 8 years ago. I was living in Orlando, Florida, and I was at a friend's house. I was in a Bible program, working for a Bible program out in Orlando, and I was single at the time, and we were over at the director's house having a cookout. And I heard that there was a new student flying in that was transferring from another program. And I was out on the back patio, and I was the one grilling. And my friend Matt Pugh was out there with me, and we're just grilling, and we're talking, and I'm burning the hamburgers. And we're talking, and all of a sudden, the door opens up. And when the door opens up, all I heard was this angelic music coming from the heavens, and this light shining down on me as I'm flipping the hamburgers. And my wife's life was forever changed when she saw me. No, but I remember that moment, though, when she walked out onto the patio. It was actually kind of the other way around. It was like this bright light was shining on her. And I looked at my friend when she walked away, and I said, "I'm going to marry that girl." And he said, "Not if I marry her first." And she walked back inside, and we walked into the house, and when we walked in the very end of a conversation that she was telling somebody that she was not going to date for the rest of the year, and she was, going to give this time to Jesus. And he looked at me and said, "You're going to marry her, huh?" And I said, "Give me 2 weeks, and I'll be dating her." 2 weeks from that day, we went out on our first date. But that moment, it changed the course of my life forever. Because I was a single guy, very immature. But the moment she walked out on that patio, it changed the course of my life. You see, that was a moment in my life that changed the course of my life. Another moment that I could remember, one that was more recent, is I was on my way back from the airport, picking up my good friend and buddy, Pastor Jason Prater, from the airport, and my wife called me and said, "Hey, I got to go to work, or I got to go to a baby shower. Hurry up and come home. I have a gift for you." It was right after Christmas time, and for Christmas, Santa knew I wanted a kayak for Christmas, but I kept telling Santa that it was just too expensive. Don't get me a kayak. So when Christmas rolled around, Santa didn't bring me a kayak. So then I reminded Santa again how much I wanted a kayak. And so when she called me up, she said, "Hey, I got a gift for you. It came in late from the mail. It's something that you're really going to be excited about." And the first thing I thought of was, Santa got me a kayak. So I dropped Pastor Jay off at his car, and I book it home. And I'm sitting there, and she said, "Hurry up, I got to go to this baby shower. Sit down, I'm going to go get your gift." And as I'm sitting there, I'm telling Beth, "You better not have got me a kayak," hoping that it's a kayak. She comes out with this bag, and she puts it in my lap. She goes, "Open it up." And the first thing that came to my mind was, kayak can't fit in a bag. And so I begin to open up this bag, and as I open up the bag, I pull out a boy and a girl baby onesie. And I'm looking at it, and I look at her, and I go, "I think you mixed up the gifts. This is a gift you're taking to the baby shower." And she didn't say anything. And I look at her, and I look at this, I look at her, and I said, "No." She said, "Yep." And in that moment, my life was forever changed. The course of my life in that moment was changed. Because you see, I was a married guy, a little bit immature. And now I have a baby on the way. Now I got to grow up. Now I got to become a man. Now I got to know what it's like to be a father, a dad. The course of my life was changed in a moment. But you see, not all moments in your life will change the course of your life. Sometimes they just define your life. But you see, a lot of times we misunderstand what it is for something to define our lives, because when we think that something has defined our lives, we think that something has happened to us, or something has been placed on us, or something has gone wrong, and it has forever defined our lives, when that's not the meaning of define. Actually, the definition of define is to find out the character. It is to figure out the character. When you define something, you're defining it based off its character. You see, your character is your identity. Your character is what, when I look at you, I can tell who you are because of your character. And when things define you, it doesn't necessarily change your character, but there might be some things in your character that you didn't know you had. And I can think of a moment in my life where it didn't change the course of my life, but it defined my life. I remember getting a phone call on the way home from Disney World, and my parents saying, "Hey, I need you to stop by the house on the way home." And I stopped by the house, and when I walked in, things just felt a little different, and they sat us down on the couch and decided to tell us that after 34 years of being married, that they were no longer going to stay together. In that moment, my life was defined. That moment in my life began to define who I was. I came home a little shell-shocked, packed my bags, got on a plane for the Philippines, and had a 24-hour flight to think about it. You see, in that moment, my life was defined, and I had a choice to make. I could either allow that moment to define my life, or through that moment, have it tell me what my character was. And you see, there's a story in the Bible, one of my favorite stories ever. It's in Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 8. I'm going to read, but this is a quick story in the Bible, and the Bible doesn't really give a whole lot of detail of what happens before or what happens after, or even a part that happens in the middle. But it's a powerful story, and there's 3 things that we can learn from this story tonight, and 3 things that can really affect our lives and change our lives. Somebody look at a neighbor and say, "Just a moment." Luke chapter 19, verse 1 says this: Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see. Zacchaeus must have been a guy like me. It says he could not see over the crowd, so he ran ahead, climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once, and he welcomed him. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be with the guest of sinners." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Lord, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." So here we have a story of a guy who was a Jew. And like I said, the Bible doesn't really give much description of what happened before this incident, or really what happens after the incident. But Zacchaeus was a Jew who was a tax collector, which means he was hated by everybody. Not only did he rob, cheat, and steal from his own people, but he worked for the foreign government that had dictatorship over them. So he was a really hated guy. And the Bible doesn't say kind of how he came to be this way. We have no idea what happened in his past. All we know is that things took place, decisions were made that took him from being a regular Jew, a regular, just run-of-the-mill guy, to now working for the foreign governor and stealing from his own people. And I can imagine Zacchaeus. Number one, Zacchaeus is rich because he steals from everybody. He's hated, yet he has to be respected because of his position. And I'm sure Zacchaeus was up on the times, up on what was happening. And I'm sure Zacchaeus knew who Jesus was. Zacchaeus, being raised in the Jewish tradition, Zacchaeus had read about the Messiah. So when he heard of this man named Jesus claiming to be the Messiah, he thought to himself, I want to go check this guy out. So he goes and he runs down to the town, but because he's so short, he can't see over the crowd. I deal with that all the time. Every time I go to a concert with the youth, I hate it. Because somehow I get stuck in the back. And I'm like, wait, I'm the leader. I'm supposed to lead from the front. Let's get out of the way. But he's too short to see over the crowd. So he begins to climb up in a tree. And as he's climbing up in the tree, he sees Jesus coming. And he's thinking to himself, wow, that's the guy right there. That's the guy everybody's talking about. Wow, that's cool. Wow, he's coming my way. And I love how the scriptures say, and Jesus came to the spot. Do you think it was coincidence that Zacchaeus just climbed up in a tree and Jesus just so happened to walk to that tree? I can imagine Zacchaeus sitting in that tree thinking to himself, man, I am the man. Not only did I climb up in a tree, I picked the very tree that Jesus was going to stop under. You see, Zacchaeus needed something from Jesus that day, and Jesus knew that Zacchaeus needed him. There was something that Zacchaeus needed in his life, and Jesus knew it. And what I love is that Jesus didn't wait for Zacchaeus to come to him, but Jesus went to Zacchaeus. Jesus went to the spot that Zacchaeus was at, and he looked up in the tree and he said, Zacchaeus, come down because I'm going to your house today. You know my name? How do you know my name? You don't know me. But honestly, though, how do you know my name? And you see, it comes to my first point that we can learn from this story is this one thing. Jesus knows where you are. Jesus knows where you are because you see, Zacchaeus went to that town that day to see Jesus because it was something that he learned. It was something that he knew, and deep down inside, it was something and somewhere that he knew he needed to be. You see, he was drawn there. And when he went there, he came encounter with a Jesus that could change his life forever. But Jesus knew he was going to be there. You see, Jesus knows what you're going through. Jesus knows where you're at. And just like Zacchaeus who climbed a tree, because maybe he didn't want to get too close to Jesus, a lot of times we do that in our own lives. We'll come to church, but we'll sit in the back. No offense. We'll sit in the back because we think, well, hey, you know, the further back it goes, the anointing just kind of thins out a little bit so I can come and not be as convicted. So we try to keep our distance from Jesus, but it's hard to keep our distance from Jesus when Jesus knows where we're at. The things that we're dealing with in our lives, we think, man, no one else knows, no one else cares. I can tell you, Jesus knows and Jesus cares. You might think to yourself that you're in the desert all by yourself, and the stuff that you're facing alone. And Jesus is telling you, you're not alone. I know where you're at, and I know what you need. You see, Zacchaeus climbed a tree, and Jesus went to the spot, and he looks up in the tree, and he says, Zacchaeus, come down. Quickly come down. We're going to your house. You're going to make me dinner, and we're going to hang out. So Zacchaeus comes down, and they start going to their house. And as they're going to the house, people begin to talk. People begin to mutter. People begin to point. People begin to say, does he not know that he's going to have dinner with the sinner? Does he not know what this man is, what he has done, what he does to us? You see, his past was catching up to him. The things that he was doing in his past were creating labels for his life. Things that he was doing, things that he had done were creating labels, which brings me to this next point. Your past does not define your future. Your past does not have to define your future. Because you see, we all have pasts. We all have things. We all have problems. We all have issues. And if we're not careful, those issues and those problems and all that stuff begin to define who we are. But God didn't care about that. God didn't care about what he did. God only cared about who he was. God didn't care about the struggles that he had. God only cared about who he was. You see, God doesn't care about your past. God doesn't care about what you're dealing with. All he cares about is you. And not only that, the stuff that we're dealing with, maybe it's bad history. Maybe it's something that's happened in your past. That maybe it was somebody that you trusted, that you lost trust in, or they did something, or things happened, or life didn't happen quite the way you thought it would. And now you feel like those things are defining your life. Maybe you feel like there's issues that have come up in your past and in your life that you feel like because of those issues, it has now defined your life. Maybe there's sin in your life or sin in your past that you feel like there's no way that you could ever be able to do what God has called you to do because of your past, because of the sin that has happened in the past, you feel like is defining your future. But Zacchaeus is on his way to his house and people are talking. And they're saying, does he not know that he's a sinner? Does he not know his past? Does he not know what he's done? And this is what I love about the story. That's verse 7, that they're talking bad about him. Verse 8, it says, but Zacchaeus stands up. And he says, look, Lord, I give half of everything I own to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody, I'll give back to them 4 times what I stole. You see, I don't know if you're good at math. I'm decent, but not very good. I can't read a tape measure. We were laughing about that today. But he's willing to give half of what he has away to the poor. And then everybody he stole from, 4 times that amount. The Bible doesn't say what happened in between verse 7 and verse 8. And at some point, Zacchaeus' heart began to change. At some point, Zacchaeus' mind began to change. I can imagine Zacchaeus sitting there at that table, listening to Jesus speak, thinking to himself, man, there's something different about this guy. There's something different that I feel right now. This guy's he's not condemning me. He's not telling me what I've done wrong. He's showing me love. And in a moment, the course of his life was changed forever. So much so that he was willing to bankrupt his personal life to make things right and to follow Jesus. You see, the third thing that we can learn from this story is just one moment with Jesus can change the course of our life. Just one moment in the presence of the Almighty can change our lives forever. It doesn't matter the sin that we've committed. It doesn't matter the issues that we're struggling with. It doesn't matter the past that we've come from. One moment with Jesus can change your life. There's a scripture in the Bible in John chapter 16, verse 33, and Jesus is about to leave this earth, and he's telling his disciples, and he's giving his disciples some last words. But in verse 33, this is what he says to them. He says, I have told you all of these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. You see, a lot of us have sin in our lives or in our past, issues, struggles, things that we're dealing with, pain, hurts. And we think to ourselves, can I get over this? A lot of us, we've hit a brick wall because it seems like every time we try to get past that or try to get over that, we can't. Because we're reminded of what happened, and we're afraid that if we try to overcome it and we bring it all up again, that all it's going to do is bring up the pain back in our lives. Or if we try to overcome our past, that all it's going to do is remind us of who we used to be, and we're too afraid of being reminded of that because we're afraid we might go back to that same thing. You see, a lot of us aren't living our true potential in God because we can't seem to get past our issues. And God's saying, look, in this world, you're gonna have trouble. In this world, there will be problems. There will be issues. You will struggle with things. You're human. But take heart, because I've already overcome the world. The sin that you committed, I've already overcome it. The pain that you've been feeling, I've already overcome it. The issues that you're dealing with, I've already overcome it. Take heart, because I have overcome. But we allow those things to define our lives. When God's saying, don't allow the problem to define your life, but coming out of the problem should define who you really are. As Chris comes to the piano tonight, I was reading, and I love history and all this stuff, and I was reading about one of the top 4 most famous artists, sculpture people, whatever you call them, sculptors in the world, and his name was Michelangelo. And I was reading up on him, and I was reading, and I saw a very interesting kind of little tidbit about him. If you don't know who he is, he's the one who created the statue of David. It's a gorgeous statue, and you can go and you can look him up by his name, and it lists all these beautiful statues that he made out of stone. They're gorgeous. I don't even know how he did them. They're so like smooth and shiny, and I can barely draw a stick figure on a piece of paper. But I was reading up on him, and they were talking about how he chose the stones that he would pick to create the masterpieces that he created, like the statue of David. And it said that there was this one rock quarry that he loved to go to because he loved the way that the stones looked. And at this rock quarry, they would have hundreds, if not thousands, of pre-cut blocks sitting out there for him to choose from. But he would never choose one of the pre-cut stones. He refused to. Actually, he thought in his mind that because they were already pre-cut and they were packaged and they were in a nice, almost like cookie cutter shape and form, that man had added too much to that it no longer had the character and the integrity that he was looking for. But all he would look for was rocks that fell by themselves. Not the pre-cut ones, but the ones that would fall on their own. The ones that would just be laying in a pile. The ones that they would look at and think to themselves, that's not a really good stone. Let's just leave that one there. Let's not mess with that one because it's got too many flaws in it. Let's not cut that one because that one there, it's got too many cracks in it. It's got too many bumps. It's not shaped right. And they actually said that Michelangelo would go and he would spend hours and days and weeks and sometimes even months searching for the perfect stone to do his masterpieces on, so much so that he would almost jeopardize the job that he was commissioned to do because he just couldn't find the perfect stone. But he never wanted a pre-cut one, a pre-made one, but he wanted the ones that was just laying in a pile. Because he didn't want anything added to it. But Michelangelo's philosophy was that the beauty in the art is not in what you add to it, but what you take away from it. You see, Michelangelo could look at a stone and look past the cracks on the outside, look past all the blemishes, all the things that everybody else would pass off, and he could see the statue of David on the inside of it. He could see the beauty inside the stone because it wasn't what you added, but it was what you take away. And he would take that home, and he would begin to chisel on that rock, and he would begin to remove all the pieces that everybody else deemed that it wasn't worthy enough. And before you know it, he had the most beautiful creation standing in front of him. You see, in our lives tonight, our lives are riddled with sin. Our lives are riddled with bad decisions. Our lives are riddled with things that have happened in our past that brings pain, that brings confusion. And we look at ourselves in the mirror and we don't see what God sees. We come to church and we try to fit that cookie cutter mold, thinking that if everybody thinks that I'm happy, that I'll be good. You see, we come in and we try to act like we're okay. We come in and we try to act like everything is all right. We come in and we try to act like God is in our lives and everything is okay. But we come in and we leave the exact same way that we came because we're too afraid to let Jesus come close to us. We're too afraid to let Jesus come near us because of what has happened in the past we might be ashamed of, we might be afraid of, we think defines us. We think we've got too many things wrong with us. We think there's too many cracks in our lives. We think that there's too many bad things and we've been pushed off by everybody else, and the labels that have been placed on our lives, we don't feel like we'll ever be able to get past those. But Jesus is telling you tonight, it's not what somebody adds to your life, but it's what I can take away from your life. It's not what other people say about your life. It's not about those mistakes that you made in your past, but it's what about I can do in your life and the things that I can begin to take away. The sins in your life, he can take the guilt. The pain in your life, he can begin to take it away. The struggles in your life, he can begin to chisel those away. And when he's done, standing before him is the most beautiful creation ever made. Why? Because it's not the moments that define your life, but it's your Creator that defines your life. It's not the pain from your past that defines your life, but it's your Creator that defines your life. The sin in your life doesn't define you. Your Creator defines you. And as you stand to your feet tonight, I want to leave you with this scripture. It's in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. They don't have it back there, but it simply says this: "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." That tells me right there that we were created on purpose for a purpose. That even though when we look in the mirror we don't see purpose, we were created for a purpose. That even though we look in the mirror and we don't see what God is doing in our lives, we're God's handiwork. And maybe there's still some pieces in your life that God just needs to chisel away. Maybe there's some labels that are on your life that maybe God just needs to chisel away. One moment with Jesus can alter the course of your life forever. One moment with Jesus can change your life forever. Because it's not about those moments defining your life, but it's about your Creator. With every head bowed, every eyes closed, I want to do something tonight.